Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. My name is Christian D. Evans, your host. And guys, we have someone very special on because, we've got a lot of women out there that are just go-getters and accomplished. But to have a journey like this woman here, just incredible. She was 350 pounds, and then just now a full athlete, but also just an incredible, accomplished woman. She is a successful entrepreneur, having founded Shape House, LA's premier sweatshop that caters to some of the world's best-known celebrities. Currently, she's the CEO of becurrent, a unique method that helps people not just become more productive, but productive with purpose. She's an executive coach to a number of Fortune 500 executives. She's also been featured on Ellen, Good Morning America, and many other national shows. She has, like I mentioned, lost 200 pounds and wrote a book about it called War and Piece of Cake, which is being made into a TV show. She's even been performed as a street clown in the street of Paris. My friend, Sophie Chiche. How you doing today, Sophie?
So nice to see you, and look at what's behind you. I want to be there. Where are you?
Yeah, we are actually in the panhandle of Florida, and I just appreciate you just jumping on. Just incredible background, but kind of tell me. I mean, obviously, your transformation going from from just living life
350 pounds
yeah.
heavy.
Yeah, to 350 pounds, but also just living life to all of a sudden being featured on Ellen and just kicking butt in life.
I would say all of a sudden is a little bit of overstatement because like the Beatles became a success overnight. They were, banging their guitars for 20 years before that. It may look like overnight, but it definitely it's a journey. I love the title of your show because life is a journey, and sometimes it's on the outside and places where we go, and sometimes it's on the inside, places where we go. And so, yes, I've gone from 350 pounds to now playing pickleball 2-3 hours a day and becoming really good at it. And it's crazy that I've had a life without that, like almost like without performing with my body. Like I used to think that my body was a vehicle for my head, like it was really, I was a thinker, I was a smart person, I was a funny person, and that's what I had. And now it turns out there's a dimension of like running around on a court and playing really well. So that's been amazing.
Well, let's kind of dive into this. So, going from 300 pounds, what was that deciding part for you? And at what point in your life and your journey was it's like, okay, I can't deal with this anymore? But was it just and what did you feel like during that time?
It is definitely a journey. I love that word again. It wasn't a decision, and there was plenty of starts that were not starts, turns out, because I would gain a lot of the weight back because I I would lose 20, I would gain 30, I would lose 30, I would gain 40. That's how you get to, 350 pounds. And so I would say there was two moments. One, I lost a very dear friend when I was 19 years old. She died of an aneurysm and pretty much dropped dead when we were very young. And we were doing the hard life in many ways, food and rock and roll and, sex, the whole thing. And she dropped dead. And there was a moment of looking in the mirror and saying, all right, well, that's where you're going. That is the path very clearly. Maybe I won't die this week, but I'm definitely on that particular journey. That's a very difficult and painful one. And so when she died, there was okay, so it's either you keep going or you make a hard right. And I did. And I started doing workshops, and I met with therapists and healers and like you name it. Like actually, I wrote at the time I was writing for a magazine, and they made me write an article that was called "I've Tried It All," because I did. Like I would literally go into 21 days of silence workshop, and then I would go into eat celeries for 70 days and see what happens. It's like I was just really extreme, and I guess I'm pretty extreme. So when I do good for myself, it's also a little bit extreme. So there was that. That was like a major turning point. And then the other one. Is I found myself in front of a refrigerator, which that's a lot of what I would do. Like at night, I would wake up, I would feel lonely or desperate or sad or whatever the feelings, probably all of those. And I would go to the refrigerator and I would pull up a stool and I would sit in front of the bright light, cold, freeze my booty and just eat everything in sight. And that one day, I sat there and I heard a voice. I mean, not like I'm not a wacko doo-doo, ghost talking to me, but I heard something from inside of me that said, you can eat everything, but before you do that, I want you to feel what you're feeling right now. It was very calm. It was very grounded. And I went, okay. And so I pulled up the stool because I could feel it was going to be a minute. And I closed the fridge and I sat there, and it was a flood of everything I had not felt until, since I was a very young child. Children are raised with like, don't cry, don't make noise, don't be angry, don't be sad, just like a lot of that. And so I did what I was told. And then I grew up to be a bottled up, crazy, angry person. And so I did. I felt and I cried and I was pissed and I yelled. There was no one in the house, thankfully. And it may have lasted, I mean, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes. It could have been 5. It could have been an hour. I really don't know. But there was this like, blah. And then I said, all right, now I can go eat, right? And then my body was like, yeah, you can. But you don't want to, right? And I was like, no, and I never did it again. And so, the second turning point is feel your damn feelings.
Well, and and I appreciate you saying that, because embracing in today's world, we just become numb, right? We numb ourselves out to social media. We numb ourselves out to, addictions or other things. And we don't want to experience those feelings. And during that journey, because that was the deciding part, but throughout the journey, the rest of the way, who was beside you? Or was it just you just going out there every single day fighting for it? What did that look like?
No, I'm sure you've talked a lot about performance and what it takes to get to where you want to be. And it does take a village. It really does. They were the friends. They were the friends that were not friends, that turned out to be liked you a lot when you were fat and not successful. And as you started becoming more successful, turned out, very jealous and not so kind anymore. So that had to go. And then, yes, therapist. I remember one woman who said to me, at least you're honest. Most, my large body spoke to my vulnerability and my pain. And most people do, behind closed doors, gambling or porn or all sorts of other addictions, as you very well said, as a way to numb. And we can do it in all these different ways. And when you start feeling the feelings, the first wave is freaking scary, because it's like, I'm going to stay there. I'm going to be angry and miserable for the rest of my life. And you don't. It's like, I learned that first thing was like I said, it resembled throwing up a little bit, of stuff that had been there for so long. But now, and it may happen as we talk, now I'll be very moved and my tears will come up and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm very touched. And then that will go. But I feel what's happening. I'm not pretending it's not happening. And now that it's little by little, as opposed to this giant, load, it's actually very pleasant, because the rest of the time you're actually not sad and not angry, and you don't pretend, you're actually feeling the joy in a very different way too.
So what I'm hearing you say really is you tried all those other diets, you tried all those things, and you were just very aggressive in a lot of those diets. But for some reason, when you were in front of your fridge, something changed. And during that change, that's when things really started moving in the right direction. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And, I think there's lots of circumstances where the superficial level is not where it's at, so people will change the food, or they'll, quit smoking, but they don't really resolve the thing. Like, there's a reason why, most people don't go to 350. That's like building a castle around you. Why did I do that? And that was where the juice was, that's where the gift, the learning, the self-love. I remember one of the diet, which was really not a diet because it had nothing to do with the food, except that every bite in my mouth, I would think, is this an act of love? Literally for weeks, every bite. I mean, that's a commitment. And I stayed with it, it's like, is this an act of love? And some bites was like, no. And I would be like, well, that's what we do now. We do acts of loves. And so I would stop eating the fries or the whatever, really was not. I knew there was another moment where a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, way later in the journey of healing all this, but my friend Vincent, who to me looked healthy, like he wasn't on a diet all the time. He just ate what he wanted and he was thin, and just was healthy. And And I remember asking him what was if he had a gift for me, to learn on the journey. And he said, I think about how I want to feel after I eat. And then I choose what I eat. And I remember thinking, so he said, sometimes on a Sunday when I want to veg all day and I don't have anything to go do, it's like, that's the day I'll have the fries and the shake and the this and the that, because I'll take a nap and it's okay. But if it's an afternoon of meetings and being with people and having my mind, really alert, it's like, well, then I don't do a hamburger with a shake, because then I'll be all foggy. So he decides his food in a very partnership, collaborative kind of way. And that's kind of how it affected me. Like I started saying, like, is this a moment of love, this food I'm about to do? And so now it extends to the way I shop, and it extends to the way I cook, and it extends to the fact that I don't watch the news or the whatever while I'm eating. I'm not doing, Instagram. I'm eating. It's like, it's an activity, I don't do something else while I do eating. Eating is a thing that I do consciously and deliberately now. That was a long answer to your question, but you explained.
No, I love it. And it just elicits so many more questions that I have for you. And what I'm curious on, because I love that mindset switch in regarding when you're eating, is this, what did you say it was? Is this making me happy? Is that what
is this an act of love? I mean,
act of love.
He said,
yeah, I love that.
How do I want to feel after I do this? And honestly, you can use that for, when you lie, how do you feel after? When you overeat, how do you feel after? When you stay up, till 3 a.m. watching some stupid show, how do you feel? It's like, when I do this particular activity, how do I feel? And it's, who else is going to help me direct my boat of life? Like, I need to be like, how does it feel for you right now to be outside? You're wearing your shades, you have your cool headphone, and there's boats behind you. You did something to do this. You're not in a cave, mining over there. You did something that led you to like this moment, right? You're liking this moment, don't you?
100%. And that's what I find so interesting, is that instead of becoming emotional, you're really thinking logical and saying, okay, what's the result? What's the emotion that I want to associate this? And because I've dealt with, and I've worked with individuals that, have this love-hate relationship with food. And all of a sudden they go on the diet and they're just really strict and they don't ever do it. Or then they bounce back and then they're just, consuming a whole bunch of food, and that's not healthy. And so what I found so interesting, what you're saying to me, is that you've built a really good intentional love and healthy relationship with food. Yeah. And so with the rest of that journey, that was the deciding part. Yeah. What other things did you implement? Because what I love what you said as well is that it also affected other aspects of your life. And so 100%. I'm just curious. Yeah, tell me more about that. I'd love to hear that.
Well, I really love that you made that bridge without having me make it, because usually it's a little... like the way I started looking at how do I get my body from 350 pounds to, 160 or whatever was good for my height. I'm very tall. So, and that was also part of the blessing / I was never really like move, because my body was really tall. And so there was never like one jam thing, so I always was able to function, in life and not miss jobs or miss relationships, like I was never that impaired in some way. And yet it was very heavy on my bones and it was really difficult to carry it around. But the way I started looking at it, to answer your question, is it was a project. Like, how do you build a house? Well, what's the base, what's the foundation of the house, and where do you want to put the bathrooms, and how many, rooms do you want, and windows facing this way or that way? And we do that for things. We do that for the car. We do that, we do that for a lot of external things, even for a job, like what kind of job do I want and what project do I want to work on? That's very logical for people, but we are a project. Like this thing over here, is a beast to be managed a little bit, like it's not easy to be human, especially right now. It's like we're on the possible brink of, World War III, and we just came out of this crazy 2 years of pandemic, and this just, everyone is uprooted or thriving because they really caught the wave and somehow they're more excited than they've ever been. It's kind of we'll look back to this time as like, what the F was happening to us a little bit. And so to stay a good human, to stay centered, to stay committed to oneself, to stay on track, not easy. So how do we accompany the way you would a child? It's like, how do you parent your child? When he falls, what do you do? When he cries or when he doesn't understand, or when he wants to do something that you really don't think is good for them, what do? You talk, you communicate, you love, you try to understand, right? So doing that with ourselves is kind of it's the moon for me. Like, I don't care to go to the moon, but I care to do this.
Which makes perfect sense. And so kind of tell me a little bit, like, how, by implementing this and by really focusing on that weight, right? How did it overflood into other avenues of your life? Maybe professionally, maybe relationally. I'd love to hear that.
It was huge, like to go, because it wasn't subtle. 350 to 150 brings you from outsider to normal human. I mean, I hate that it's the framework, but it is, when you're 350 pounds, especially in France. Like, I lived in Paris, remember, where people are, 90 pounds is not unusual. And so when you're 350, you really are on the outskirts, and everything affects you. Like, you walk in and the restaurant has chairs that that if you sit on it, it's going to break, so you find a casual, cool way to stand, because really you don't want to find yourself on the floor, or a plane, where you literally cannot fit in the seat, or inevitably there's someone who brings you this like extension to the seat belt, that everybody notices is for your seat. And I mean, there's just so much of that stuff that goes on. And so to me, it was a little bit like you'd wake up tomorrow and you're a Chinese old lady. Like, it's that big of like, because life as a larger person, obese person, and a life that's not that is big in our society, And so for a long time, I would pass a mirror and I'd be like, oh my God, she's cool. Look at her shoes. Oh, wow, it's me. Like, or I would take a picture next to you and I would be like, oh my God, I'm going to look like an elephant. And then I would look at the picture and be like, what is wrong with your mind? Like, it's a dysmorphia that it took me a while, but now I would say that it's been, 10 years, the journey of losing the weight has been a while now. And so I would say I tackle big things again, the language is so, I tackle big things with a lot more courage. Like, I've become very brave. I know how to tackle, I'm afraid of this, but let's do it anyway, or I'm seeing that I want to make this change, but wow, it's not just a one layered thing. A lot of things are multi-layered, so now I work with productivity with people. I accompany executives, in their journey of, not only accomplishing a lot and being very performant, but also not going home and, not recognizing their kids, or even worse, not recognizing themselves. And so the journey of the weight was very, when you learn something somewhere and then it transfers to something else. Like, I could see myself on the pickleball court and I'm like, wow, I'm not very patient. Like, I want to, hit the ball more than I want to strategize with the ball. And so, 3 months ago, I'm like, all right, well, let's tackle the strategizing of the ball. Well, strategizing of life instead of, just necessarily just hitting the ball in life. Now it's a little more of like, where am I going? And is this move, helping me get there? And be much more deliberate. I love that you used that word earlier. It's like very intentional. Intentional eating forces you to be quite intentional with everything else, because all of a sudden your sleep is affected. Actually, I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see it. I'm wearing, do you see this on my arm?
Yeah.
It's pinned to my arm. It's glucose management system, and I'm not diabetic. But the fact that I can wake up and in the morning and see where my glucose went and what's my insulin, and when I eat anything, it immediately, like, I had crackers. That made me laugh so hard because I'm actually really on range. Like, I don't need sugar, so my glucose is actually very well managed. But I did have a lot of crackers that day. I was a little bit, I didn't eat lunch, whatever. And so, I did that thing where you're like, oh, wow, it's the end of the box of crackers. How did that happen? And my glucose, it was so funny. My line was usually so flat, went like giant peak, So now, next time I want to do crackers, I mean, I may do it anyway, because whatever, but I'll know that it affected me, so intensely. And I crashed afterwards. I was tired, and people called and said, do you want to go play pickleball? I was like, yeah, not today. I was just like really sluggish. And that because of my glucose monitor, I was like, well, that's what happens after you eat a bunch of crackers. You crash because it's sugar, right? So yeah, it affects me in pretty much every way.
I love that story. And what I think is so interesting about you, Sophie, is that you've taken a very analytical approach and you're acquiring skills through your journey. And you basically leverage those skills for your business, for your executives, for training and teaching and living your life. And what I find so interesting is, I guess, Sophie, my question is like, where did that come from? Because I think you and I know that you're very rare in that circumstance. A lot of people are okay with their weight and it doesn't acquire that much pain and they just perfectly fine. But I guess, where do you think that came from? Was that just you thinking differently, or do you think that was just the way you were raised? Where do you think that came from?
That's such a good question. I think it's a combination. I mean, I don't know what you believe spiritually, but I think we come with a bit of a suitcase of things for life. And so maybe I was given, everything was sped up, because I was so overweight and because it was visually clearly happening, so in school, my parents were called, come immediately. Like, we just discovered she's gained, 70 pounds or whatever it was at 10 years old, which led to put me in therapy sooner, which led to, really breaking a lot of my self-esteem. And I had to rebuild that. It's like, I think I was gifted. Your mess is your message. I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's like, I was given a lot of messes. And probably because at some point I was meant to turn around and do something with it, that would serve people. So I remember when I first became thin, I was doing a talk and I didn't address the fact that I used to be large. And so people that are thin, that have their shit together, for some reason, they tend to have a little bit of, I don't know. I don't think it's us. I don't think it's me putting it out. But in that case, at the end, people came to me and they were like, who are you to give us blah, blah? Like, what do you know about suffering? And what do you know about being, this lady said, what do you know about being overweight? And she was certainly not as overweight as I was. And I was like, can I show you a picture? And it was so sweet because it brought me back, to the humanity of, we all struggle with something, and let's, accompany each other on the journey. So I don't know how to answer your question really intelligently. I think I came with it some, and then I nurtured some, and then I started getting, I have an answer. I know exactly what you're asking that I love to talk about, which is, I think people don't realize, they think it's better when you say, some people are overweight, they don't care, they just like walk around like it's nothing. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think we learn self-love and body, positivity, and that's all beautiful. But when I was carrying my 200 extra pounds, which may have been even more, it's possible I was even heavier because at the time it was like a digital, scale, and the needle, went to 350. So it's possible it was really 370 or whatever. But, my bones, I actually saw a picture once of someone who was the heaviest person recorded. He was like 900 pounds. He's known because when he died, sadly, they had to take him out of the house with a crane because they couldn't take him out, outside the door. So, but I saw a picture, an X-ray of his body, and, you could see the shadows that made his body. It was very, very big. And then in the middle there, this little mini skeleton, it was so small. And the bones that holds the whole thing, these little ankle things are so small. And I saw that and I just burst. I just can cry right now just thinking about this, because it was an incredible amount of weight for such a little bone, two bones. So, I don't think it's a matter of like, it's better to be thin, because you can fit in jeans or whatever. It really, the anatomy makes it. Imagine if you walked around all the time with 200 pounds on your back, that makes everything difficult. It's heavy. And so finding ways to heal ourselves, of whatever made us overeat maybe along the way is a good route. Just get to know who that is and get to love who that is.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that and just being authentic. And I'm curious because you did say self-esteem and self-image. I do know the importance of self-esteem and self-image. I mean, just not even just, being holistic with yourself, but also building businesses and so forth. It takes courage and it takes confidence. So what did that journey look like in regards to just, how low of a self, image did you have? And then how did you rebuild that to the level that you are at now?
That's probably one step at a time. When I started shifting the boat, it's like a boat has this big of a thing in the back, and then that shifts the boat. It's not a big it's often not a big thing that changes direction. Actually, it's there's so many books right now about small habits, atomic habits and all that. One step at a time, literally one bite at a time, 1 minute at the gym at a time, one choice of not watching TV and journaling your sadness, or whatever might be for you. But it's like literally every little moment you choose a better, and in business, of course, it's true as well, like take one phone call when I kind of don't really feel like it, but then somehow I muster something and then I do it. And then minutes into the call, seconds into the call, I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. Like I love what I do so much and I'm all reignited. And so, 1 second at a time, literally, and $1 at a time, and one employee to grow the company at a time. It's just a very methodical process and emotional. Like you were saying earlier, I don't distinguish exactly the two. I have a strategy about how to go about my feelings, but I certainly feel my feelings and I feel my emotions, not in a out of control way, because I think that fridge moment gave me that gift. It cleaned, it gave me a blank slate. And so when I'm sad today, I'm sad for what happened right now. I'm not sad for, 50 years of something that I didn't say. It's a much more immediate thing. So it's smaller. And so sometimes in business, I'll be in a meeting and I'll feel the sadness that someone is, I don't know, whatever it is, obsessed with money, and that's all they want to talk about. And that's not how I run my company. And so I'll sit there and I'll be like, I want to hear you. And what's in the room right now? Because, being so obsessed with money comes with, probably needing to prove something. So let's talk about that. And, and I'll shift the boat to a conversation, that deepens the conversation. I guess if there was one thing about me that always was special, and that's why I think we come with something, because I was very young and everyone was obsessed with the shoes and the watches and the cars and all the, depending on the age, but there was a lot of that. And are you happy? Are you feeling, are you fulfilled? I was like so young when I would ask these questions. I think I came in with a little bit of that in my milk.
Well, let's talk about this, because obviously you deal with executives and CEOs, and let's be honest, in business world, in corporate America, whether you run a business or whether you're in charge of a business, you really have to make decisions and you have to put your emotions to side. You have to think logically, and you're asking certain questions that really dive deeper into that. Okay, well, that's subconscious, if you will, right? Things that are running. So when you're working with these high level execs, right, and they have to put their emotions over here, and you're basically asking questions that elicit emotion and really allow them to stop. What are some topics that you are finding in the C-level arena that they're struggling with, and just being okay and open with those? I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in general, it probably falls in the umbrella of fear. So there's those that have succeeded and they're afraid they're going to lose it. And then there's those that haven't completely achieved yet and they're afraid they're never going to achieve it. And then there's those that have achieved something and made a lot of money, but they're absolutely not connected with their purpose. And that is miserable, maybe the most miserable, actually, because the one that's in the quest of succeeding at something, he's still hoping that when he gets there, he's going to get something he doesn't have now. But when you've gotten there and you now know that it's not that's going to give you happy, there really is a moment there, which is often when people seek out work with me is when they realize that all that shit they were told is going to be doing something for them is not doing it for them. I'm not saying it's not fun to have a cool car or plane or whatever. You look like you're about to go fly a plane, by the way, with those glasses. But, to realize that it's not really that, it adds to the cake, but it's not the cake. Like the cake is self-fulfillment and it's self-love and it's getting to know yourself. I was fascinating recently when I was talking and, sometimes you say something and you're like, whoa, but that was like a cool thing I just said, like a concept that you never said before. And I was talking to someone about how we're afraid of what we don't know. And I realized people don't know themselves. So they're afraid of themselves in some way, and so to not like people, when I poke with executives, it's the first exercise is really to just gently mirror what is there, because, oh, wow, like this one executive I was working with recently, she's very high up in a company, that has, probably top 5 in this country. And she looked at her board that I built with them. So I worked with Trello, which is a tool that helps to manage projects. And so it reveals what's in their life. Like, I'm really under the hood with them. Like, it pulls out, like, what do you do? What are you engaged with? Where did you commit yourself to? Your family, your health, your book you want to write, your employees you want to, do something with, your shareholders that are waiting for something from you, and all of that. And this woman was looking at her board, and she had this like probably one of the saddest, in a cartoon, when you want to show sad, there's like this whole thing, like it drops, the mouth, the eyes, like the whole thing drops. And she was like, I hate my life. I like none of these things. That's, supposedly my life. And she just had this. So, it's not always this dramatic, but I don't even need to push a lot. It's like what I do is I say, hey, do you see what's going on? Do you see what you feel when you go home? Do you see what it feels like to start your day when you want to vomit? You're so, scared or out of your mind. And do you think other people have it much better than you? Because they don't. And so somehow you all walking in there, put a costume on, oh, I'm a C person. Look at me. I know what I'm doing. And I know you don't know what you're doing. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay, because if you know what you're doing at all times, it means you're not, like, who knows what they're doing at all times? Someone who's dead, that's the only person who knows what they're doing at all times. They're doing nothing, that everybody else of us, we try, it's like a kid, when he doesn't know how to walk, he has to feel this like grappling of like, oh, I don't know how to do this. And then try, and then drop, and then do again. And C's the same way, like executives the same way, employees, managers, everywhere. We all have to grapple if we are moving forward. Those who don't move forward, they're going backwards. So,
wow, and I love what you just said, because C-level execs are exactly the same people as the janitor, right? They struggle with the same thing. And the biggest thing is, one of my mentors many years ago, he said, most people ask you, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And the better question is, what kind of lifestyle do you want to live? And then work backwards from there, right?
Yes.
Because then
reverse engineering, yes,
right, exactly. And one of the things is just like, like that exec that you're coaching, she got to the top, right, climbing up the ladder of success, and all of a sudden looked around and said, I don't really like this, right?
It ain't it.
And so let me ask you, when that happens with a client, because I think there's more people out there than we realize, even people that, build a business and they're, making, high 6 figures, maybe several $1,000,000, and they look around and say, I don't know if I really want to do this. I don't really want to keep doing this. And so how do they what do you do, and how do you help people to stop and internally look at themselves? Because we are in a culture right now where it's busy, 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 and we're not just stopping and just really just embracing ourselves. And like you had to go through really analyzing your own patterns and your own processes and your own thoughts.
Sometimes it's not it's a really good question. You're asking really good questions, Christian. Thank you. Sometimes it's not a matter of how long does it take to change. It could be instant. Like, some people make decisions in way, like, for example, if you wake up in the morning, and I'm a doctor, and you come to me and you say, my head hurts a lot. And I watch you and I'm like, hey, dude, you're walking on your head. You're like hobbling around on your head. Doesn't that hurt? Like, yeah, that hurts a lot. I have headaches a lot. And I'm like, all right, have you tried on your feet? Yeah, let me try. That's a good idea. And then you turn them around and they try their feet and their headaches is gone, right? Well, how long does it take? Like, do you think he's going to go hobbling on his head for too much longer? It's like, okay, he got it. And I think we make change. We've like, no, people don't change, and change is so difficult. It's like the culture has made it like it's easier to just eat a chocolate, whatever right now and fall asleep, or drown myself. It's not. It's actually easy to change. That's maybe one of the things I want to make a revolution about. It's like there's a behavior that doesn't work. We accept it. When you learn a music instrument or sport and someone comes and says, hey, the way you're putting your hands on the piano, it's not super helpful. Can we try this? You don't go, oh, wait, I'm very attached with this way. Like, no, I really want to hit my knuckles on the keys. It's like, no, so I think the mentors that we have, if they're good, they help us make distinctions that are a little bit different. And all of a sudden, like, one of the big, you're asking me about my C-level people, they're their shit, like, they're badass. They've done all these things, and you're right. They've gotten there. They do often have the plane and the this and the that and the other. And yet when they work with me, they'll be like, really? You think I can like take a week off, whatever it is, like whatever I invite them to do, they turn into 5-year-old little piles of, it's beautiful. It's beautiful that somehow, I don't know if it's the safety, maybe because I'm so honest and I'm so vulnerable with my stuff, that somehow they're like, oh, she doesn't seem to be falling apart when she does that, right? And so I think maybe it, by mirroring and by, it serves a little bit as a, what do you call that? It's like when you mimic someone, it's like someone starts looking at you and go like, well, that's actually pretty cool. Like maybe I could be sad right now. And then somehow it breaks it through. And it's not like, even the way you described, as C-level, we have to be a certain way and we certainly have to put some emotions. Do we? Like, maybe we become better leaders, when we embrace the whole complexity and we allow other people to do so. And I'm not saying let's all have therapy kumbaya at the office, but there is a line, where one of my executives right now, it's like, he's been given like 3 months for depression. And they had to get him out, because he was really not well. And somehow he found his way to me. And it took two weeks, maybe 3 conversations, where it started to be like, oh, maybe the faking that I'm a certain way all the time ended up piling up, like you said, for the food, right? You control your food too much. And then one day the lever breaks and it's like, you're eating, jars of something, Nutella, too much. And it's the same for feelings and being authentic. Like when I'm being authentic, I don't even know what that means. It's like, what does that mean? Like I know something and I'm hiding it from you. Like who cares? Right. So I don't know. I mean, there was a moment in my career where I was leading this organization. We had a bunch of consultants and I was kind of the CEO, but I was the one, the ears, whatever. And they would call me when something needed to be fixed. And this one guy, we started a conversation, and the whole conversation, I'm like, he's weird. Like, what's happening? Like, I'm not recognizing our usual exchange. And he seems very reactive. And every time I say something, he likes really offended. And so I'm like, I'm coming along. But at some point at the end of the call, he says, I'm sorry, I'm a little off, but my dog died in my arms this morning and I'm a little off. And I was like, how about you start the call with like, I may be a little off today. My dog just died in my arms of 20 years. Like, and also allow me to like not treat him like he's normal, just behaving like really cuckoo right now. It's more like, yeah, he's a little vulnerable. Something happened. I mean, if it lasts for a month and a half and I can't function, around him, that's no good. But to have a few hours where he's taken care of by us, and the team and allow us to be there for him. And then it shifts. And then the next day, my dog dies, and everybody's there for me. And that's okay. I don't know, maybe it's utopian a little bit to think that we can be there for each other, but God, what a world I want to be in.
Well, I think that's beautiful. And let me ask you, because when you're dealing with some of the coaching individuals, there's these high execs, is it more of lack of clarity that they are not aware that they are running these patterns in their life, and that they're not aware that they're, in this little circle or little group, and they're like, yeah, a little bubble? Or is it more of you have to go in and really change their limiting belief and say, it's okay to go take a week off. Nothing's going to fall. Nothing's, the whole business isn't going to implode. Like, what is that? Is it lack of clarity? They don't realize that they're even doing it? Or is it just like the limiting belief that deep down, they're like, this is a belief that I have and you have to transform that belief?
You are literally asking me the best questions anyone's ever asked me. You should write a book, like the best questions ever. This is really good. It's a combination. Sadly, usually, and may I dare to say maybe men more than women a little bit, something has to fall from the ceiling. So whether it's, their wife wakes up one day and says, I'm out of here, or their husbands, if it's a female executive at that level, of course. Sometimes it's someone's death, or sometimes it's a scare of their health. They end up in the hospital with tubes everywhere and someone says, dude, someone's got to change. Sadly, I would say often when I start the work, it starts a little bit from the cup is now running over, not in a good way. Like the camel has broken its thing and it's like, okay, now I need to and so then people are very open because they're suffering. And they can't cover it up anymore, and sadly, humans, again, maybe the masculine a little more than feminine, maybe, something has to be broken a little bit for a desire to fix it. And I say, let's be preventative. Let's have conversations about that stuff before, like we do it for our cars. Like we don't wait for the car to explode on the freeway to go check out the oils. We say, oh, this thing is blinking. Like, come give me oil, give me gas, give me water, whatever. We don't do that. We wait till like we're so dehydrated. It's like we start looking like we're parched, and it's like, oh, maybe I need a little water. But that's way too far, way too late. It's easier to change. There's this beautiful metaphor about planes. My husband, my guy's a pilot, and he often talks about the plane is on track very little of the time. It's mostly off track. And so off track, and then they have a way to correct. Okay, back on track. Okay, off track again. Okay, back on track. It's like we don't need to be like, oh my God, I'm going to a different country altogether to change the direction of the plane. We could do it, right away. Like the second that little indicator says, oh, you're going to China. We were going to, Morocco. Let's, let's, you don't need to wait for so long. And I really wish people had, confidence and faith that somehow they are strong and they can actually withhold the change, and take it by choice, not by, all of a sudden I have to take 3 months off because I can't get out of bed. That's pretty far out. Like I really would like people to look at themselves as more, mind you, I waited till I was 350 pounds maybe to make a bit of a turn. So maybe there is a need as humans, to somehow hit a wall a little bit to say, okay, I don't like this feeling. I want something else.
Well, there's, and that's what I found so interesting because, just to share my story, I was in the same situation where all of a sudden everything imploded. That's when I started realizing something's got to change, right? There's got to be balance of some sort. And what I found, and let me ask you, Sophie, just from coaching and mentoring, hundreds of people throughout your life, does it always have to take a huge, slap in the face by life and or can you be proactive like at early stages, or is it just more of, hey, we learn from failure and we have to experience failure a little bit and we have to sit in the crap a little bit, and then during that crap, that's when we start saying, okay, there's got to be a change, or is it, are we just so prideful throughout our beginning of our life that it's not until that failure? I'm just curious.
There's ego, ego gets but it's also the premise of life, I think, we've been lied to. It's like all of a sudden you have your shit together and go. No, it's like every moment of the day is learning. And I did something yesterday that didn't work. I want to do something today that's better about this. It's like people are expected to be, perfectionism is probably the new villain. If I directed a Marvel movie, perfectionistic would be, I'd have to find a better name for it, but it would be like, the one who like better and better and better. It's like, that is the freaking enemy of doing anything with pleasure, with joy, So yes, I think the premise that we were lied about is you should know all this and you should have it. And it's like, how? I actually witnessed a conversation once with the Dalai Lama. And there were like not many of us, maybe 20 people. And someone asked a question, which I won't repeat just for privacy for some reason, but it was like it was a deep question about life, and the Dalai Lama said nothing for like a while. Like he was sitting there and we were all like, what is he going to say? Like, what's give us the answer, and he was translated from his native language. And he said, I don't know. And we were all like, what? I don't know. And he said, I'm a scholar of Tibetan studies, I can't build a plane. It's like, I don't know. And it was so refreshing to have someone be like, I don't have a clue about this. If it interests me, let me go research. If it doesn't interest me, go ask somebody else, and that's okay. It's like somehow we go from, even in school, kids are scolded when they don't know something. They get bad grades. It's like, you don't know something. Let me see if I taught it wrong, or let me try something else. And let's learn together. Let's sit on the ground and study how the water goes into the pipe so you understand physics, as opposed to, I showed you some boring book and you don't understand. It's like, yeah, that's pretty fair. Kids are creating videos and video games all day. It's like, then they ask to like read some boring book and, it's like, that's a whole different topic. But to answer what I'm trying to remember is your question. I loved your question so much. Where did we start this?
Yeah, well, we were just talking a little bit about, but kind of the culture and obviously being more independent. And I think that's what's so interesting in what you're just saying is as you were talking, I was just thinking how the West really and just culturally we really focus on independence, right? And saying, oh, you got to be independent, you got to know
Yeah.
the answers, you got to know
Yeah.
this, and then it's not until some big massive pain, something, whether it's a divorce, a job loss, or something, business imploding, something that happens, a death in the family, that really stops you and says, okay, you know what, I got to get help, right? And that's where someone like yourself comes in. And so you help those that are already at that point, which I just love. I think that's awesome. Sophie, I can't explain to you how much value you brought to me right now, and I definitely know that you've brought a lot of value to our audience, and I just really appreciate you being on here, spending a lot of your time, and being able to invest into our audience. I really appreciate it. How can my audience reach out to you and just connect and follow you with your incredible wisdom?
The website is the place to go. You can find other things and blogs, and there's a quiz that kind of makes you explore your kind of productivity, like what gets you to take action, which is interesting. It's called becurrenttoday.com. Becurrenttoday.com. Lots of information on there.
Beautiful, beautiful. And guys, that link will be in the description below. Make sure you click on that. Make sure you consume some of her content and just be part of her, her community. And then as well as, Sophie, is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience before we let you go?
You inspired the last piece, which is ask questions, ask yourself good questions, ask others good questions. Like, you made me say things I may have never said. It's like, it was just such a joyful ride for me. And I think we can do that for ourselves, just sit down and ask yourself a couple of questions would be my, go to a place that you like looking at and drink a little tea and ask yourself things.
Awesome. And guys, that is Sophie. This is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Make sure you consume her content. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and share this with all your friends and family. And again, reminder, be uncommon if you can.